Can you notice that? Well, even if you can't, your brain can. The human brain craves order, and we look for patterns and sequences everywhere. In nature and in cities, and even the way that we interact with each other. It's how we make sense of the world around us. However, we can also notice tiny discrepancies in things when a pattern breaks. This is also who we are and how we're wired. And a side effect of this is that our visual pleasure peaks when predictability and surprise are kept in a perpetual tension. So as a designer or an artist, you can exploit this very human reflex by creating patterns and then breaking them up. By keeping order and chaos and harmony, we can make designs that cater to humanity. Hello and welcome to Take Refuge 3D with me, Peter, and today I'm going to show you how you can get an edge over other designers and apply these principles even to very basic 3D models and create dynamism with our designs and with very little effort as well. Now we're going to be using Plasticity, which is available for free for 30 days, and then if you really love it like I do, you can get a 10% discount off any Plasticity license with my affiliate code Refuge10. Now just before we get into it, I want to elaborate on what I mean, and I'm going to use Blender for this. So here we are in Blender, and I've got a single picket, like from a picket fence. I'm going to duplicate this, right, and bring it across. We can just repeat the action, right? And now we've got a picket fence, or what resembles a picket fence. And as we rotate around this, it looks like a picket fence. But there's something wrong with this, and that's the fact that it's too orderly. So this looks like a very stylized, uniform picket fence. Now with Blender's tools, we can just press F3 and hit randomize transform, okay? And this has randomized the transform very slightly. It might be almost imperceptual, okay? However, our eye notices very, very minor tweaks to this. Now we can exaggerate this, right? Give this a little bit more rotation. That's maybe too much. And like that, okay? And as we spin around this, this is something that we might look at as like a cartoon picket fence. There's one's going sideways, or, you know, like an old one. But we could take this even further, right? We can go into edit mode, and we can also randomize the vertices, okay? And this is way too much. And then we can change the seed as well, okay? And then as we go back, we've got this warble. Obviously this is very exaggerated, but you see what I mean. This feels more like a picket fence that's been exposed to the weather. Maybe some roots have grown up and pushed some of them in different directions, and there you have it. We've got this more realistic picket fence, and you could, you know, start moving this around and make like a little garden area or something like that. All right, so this is cool, and this is what I mean by the human brain interpreting things in certain ways. So let's go back to Plasticity and see how we can apply this to more uniform products and how we can get a really nice result for the eye. So here we are back in Plasticity, and if you didn't notice at the beginning, there's quite a lot going on with this. This might be a very simple model, but if you look at the curvature on the highlights, everything in this model, and we can rotate our HDRI around, everything in this model has got some kind of nuance to it. From the keys on the keyboard all having slightly different shapes, meaning that when you move light around, the highlights hit differently on almost every key. There's little bits of curvature even on the solar panel part of this calculator, right? Very, very mild. There's curvature here, there's curvature there, there's even curvature in this area here. So let's get into how we can create something like this. So let's just start a new file. Okay, so let's take this, let's just start with this cube. We can scale this right down, go into object mode, press S, Shift Z, and we're going to scale this across like so. And then we're just going to press / to get down into where the object in fact is. Okay, so we've got something like this. This can be 1/2 of our clamshell. Press G and just drag it to one side of the line there. mirror that across there. So we've basically got our clamshell thing here. So just make sure, so that's sitting on the ground. We want to select both of these and just GG and just hold down control and lock it to the center so we can mirror in all directions. And then I'm going to press 7 to go into top mode. Just before I do, I want to rotate this around. I want rotate Z 90. Okay, because I want that to be the front and so on and so forth. So we're going to go into top mode and we're just going to grab a line here. Okay, we can take it out from the center along that axis and we just mirror it across. Press 2, J, 1, and dissolve the middle vertex. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we'll just pipe this, make a pipe. Okay, and this can be the little foldy part of the clamshell. We can bring something like this out like that, just give it a little bit of detail in there, and then we can just mirror this across the center, pressing Q to union it. Okay, so now what we can do is we can take this one, we can go click R for rotate and V to move the pivot to the center of this, and for the same thing we can do to this one. So R, V, and add the pivot there. So now when we rotate these, they're going to rotate around there like that. So we've got our clamshell rotating. Okay, and we can start to add some details now. So let's just go into top mode by pressing 7 on our numpad, and let's just offset this in here, and then we can just add, like, I don't know, 3 little areas like this. One for the solar panel, one for the screen, and one for some extra details. And then on this, we can just press O. Okay. And we can then pull this in like that. Okay. So we'll select all these 3 and we'll pull those in slightly like that. And we can select this, corners like that. And I've got to try not to spin around too much. And then I'm going to hold down Control, Alt, and Shift and select that. And we can start to give these both a rounded bevel. Okay, so we're already starting to add some details here. And we can do the same with the edges. Control, Alt, click, Control, Alt, Shift, click here. And we can pull those across, and we can actually match those to those, or we can make them a G2. Whatever you like. And if you're using the beta version, which is available for student license holders, there's this new tension slider here. So I might even just play with that a little bit. Okay, so we've got this shape. We've got this basic shape going on. We can just Control R here, press Tab, and just make 4 panels like so, but make sure that they're centered. And we can take all of them, and we can just drag them down like so. And then for each of them, I'm just going to press O to offset, Shift D to duplicate, and then Shift F, and we can choose thicken. Okay. And for the top layer of each of these, what we're going to do is we're going to subdivide twice with raise degree. Okay. And then within point mode, we can select this, holding down Shift to select more, and then we can just G, and this is our first little detail. Okay, and then we can also select the edges, go into X-ray mode, these corners here, and this might be slightly exaggerated, but you'll see in a moment what we're trying to do. We're just trying to create some visual curiosity by, instead of having a flat solar panel, right, doesn't need to be realistic because this is an artistic license at this point. And if we stick on a shiny shader, you'll see that the shape, we can toggle our points, F, T, O, G, G. I recommend making a shortcut for this one. Okay, let's toggle our points for everything. Okay, and maybe this is not the best one. We can see that we've got some visual interest here because these are all quite similar, but the highlights are now very different. Okay, so, and the same goes, we can turn our edges back on, okay, and turn X-ray mode off. okay, and go back to our modeling shader. And then I just want to make something like this and something like this, selecting both of these, dragging them down, not too far, and we can drag this one down, and then we can Alt-Shift click this. Okay, it seems to have made a few extra edges over there, so we can Control to deselect those, and we can give this something like that, and we can actually make this a little bit fatter. Right, so this is not exactly what I made before, but let's go. Oh, yeah, okay, so that's actually kind of cool. We can maybe use this to our advantage. There we go, and this can be, we can duplicate this, scale it by 0. Oh, so you got to make scale 0.99. All right, and then we can thicken that, and then we can also give this some visual, just a little bit of visual curiosity. So if we toggle our points off and we see that, we'll notice that the curvature is going to be slightly different on here than it is on there. Okay, so carrying on with our modeling, we can just, with this one, we can go ham and we can just maybe bring these both down, bring that up, subdivide it, and we can bring this up. Now, this is where we can have some fun as well. Okay, we can make both of these chamfers like so. Now, what I want to do now is create the buttons. So let's create our first button. Let's just take out a square. Okay, we can maybe start our square from up there. And let's just go straight to work and pulling that up. So we got our button. Actually, we should bring it up and press tab. Okay, what we can do, get rid of our curve, is we can give this some nice rounded edges. I might give this a little bit of tension on that G2. Okay, I'm just going to mirror this across. Okay, and so I've got one button there and one button there. And then I'm going to take this one and I'm going to do a rectangular array in top mode. And I'm going to lock that to the center of there. And we're going to go down to 5. We're going to bring number 2 up to 5. And now we've got 5 sets of buttons. But first of all, let's give some visual interest to this button. So let's give it a subdivision. And let's just bring this inner subdivision down. Okay. And then, not too far, but enough to give it some visual interest. And then we can give this a chamfer. And let's just test. If we go into 1 and X-ray mode, we should be able to play with the button. Okay, it's going to fail at some point, but we can now play with the shape of our button. Okay, so knowing that, let's just test if we can add a fillet to this and then also play with the shape. Yes, we can. Okay, we should maybe just leave it as chamfers for now. Okay, so that we've got a little bit more wiggle room with what we can do with the shapes. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one as so and do what I did before. So we're going to go into object mode, number 4, X across, and then I'm going to use my rectangular array just on this one. And we're going to bring this down to 5 and this up to 5. Okay, so we got our buttons there. And what we can do, they're all kind of resting above. Let's go into isolated mode. Take all the bottoms. So you can just go into edge mode or face mode and just drag across here, only selecting the bottoms. And we can drag those down. Going out of isolated mode, we select this object, Q, and just select all the buttons. And we'll boolean the holes out. And then we press T to keep our tools. Okay. And then if we hide our buttons, hide only our buttons, we've got these here. So you can press Alt to select the loop and Alt Shift to continue to select the loops. So as we select these, sometimes you'll notice that this little gizmo stops appearing. When that happens, just press Control Z and we can scale this, and we're going to copy our distance from here, right click to accept, and we can just keep selecting and that one. And then we're going to push that out. We're going to copy our distance in here. All right. And then we've just got these 3 to go. Pull that out and copy our distance. Okay. So now we can unhide our buttons and actually probably drag them down just a jot. So now you'll notice that if we go into like a rendered mode, right, turn our edges off, and we start to rotate our HDRI, you'll notice everything's fairly uniform with these buttons. So this is where we're going to start to play around with what each button does. So this central button, okay, let's toggle our points on, right? And just choose this central one, and let's just start to pull that up, okay? So this button now has a very different shape to the rest of them. Okay, then we can select these 4 points on the outside. And then we can just pull those up slightly as well. Okay, so now we toggle our points off. Okay, when we rotate our HDRI, okay, we can increase the intensity. And let's just take our buttons, and just to highlight this, let's give them all a material. And now as we move our rotation around, we can see the highlights are behaving very differently on each one. So we've now given this a little bit of, we've broken up the uniformity of it, right? So if we compare that to what we saw just a second ago, as we move our lighting around, we can see each of these is getting a different reflection, which breaks up our continuity. Now, the next thing that we want to do, let's just hide our buttons quickly. Okay, we'll go into 4 and we go H and turn our lines back on. Okay, so I want to just pull these lines here. Sorry, where are they? These ones. So these lines here, and we're probably going to have selected some ones that we don't want, like these. So let's just deselect these by holding down Control. And let's give these all a chamfer. Okay, if it will let us. Okay, so a chamfer, not too much of a chamfer though. And then what we're going to do to create a look, this is going to be very subtle, but very cool. So we can choose this face and we can subdivide it twice, okay? And just select this one here, and we can either pull this up or down. Might be a little bit fiddly. Okay, so we pull that down, and now what we're getting, and we could possibly even select these ones. We'll give it a go, and we'll pull this up, okay? And we'll try and pull this one down again. Give it a red hot go. Okay, and now what we're getting is a sort of a gradient of the length of the chamfer from the center to the outside. And this actually creates a lot of visual. Maybe let's give this a new material now, just so we can see this a bit better. And as you'll see, it's very, very subtle, but there is some level of curvature on this surface here. And we can also see this by using the measure tool. So if we come to our lines, okay, and let's just make this a construction plane by pressing Shift, temporary plane there, Shift and spacebar. And let's just take out our measure tool. Okay, and let's drag that from there to there and drag that across. And you can see that is 0.202 centimeters. And if we come to the central one, okay, and quickly make that a construction plane, pull out our measure tool, okay, you'll see that's 0.1 0.19 centimeters. So we're getting this very, very subtle difference in the width of these, starting from the edge where it's the fattest to the narrowest in the middle. So now if we unhide our objects, okay, and let's just give this the same color. Let's give these a color, and we'll give this a color. This is a bit small for my liking, but we'll just, for the sake of the tutorial, give this a nice green color and maybe a little bit of opacity as well. Now, if we give this a nice kind of aluminium, rotate all of these up. As you can see, we've created a fair amount of visual complexity in the highlights here, especially if we look at this from above. You can see that these have all got different highlights, and as we move around them, it creates dynamic reflections, right? And that's what you're looking for. So despite the fact that this is a very simple, easy to make model, we've added stuff that the average human won't notice, but their brain will. So we've got dynamic highlights on our keys. We've got these chamfers, which are variable from the edge to the center in their length. Now, I doubt anybody would ever pick up on that unless they were very keen-eyed, but there's a little part of your brain that goes, that's interesting, and that's what you want to do. And then with these solar panel things, you can see that the reflections on them vary as you go around. You know, you want to give your model a little bit more love than what we've done here. But yeah, so that is how you can add visual complexity without very much effort. And obviously we can start to, you know, give more details where it's needed and just build this thing up. Okay, maybe this could be a chamfer in here, something like that. And we're just starting to get details, shapes and details, and it looks great. So look, I hope that was helpful to somebody, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Don't forget you can get a 10% discount off any Plasticity license with my code REFUGE10, and see you all soon. Tschüss!